Hey, I'm Chris, and these are my top 10 games of 2017. So last year was a really strong year for games. I think there were something like 3,500 games released last year, which is absolutely insane. There's no way anybody could play all of those. I certainly didn't. I played, I think, around 40 of the new games released last year, so this is by no means a huge all-encompassing list. I'm by no means, you know, like some sort of crazy expert, but I enjoyed a lot of these games a lot, and I wanted to share my top 10 with you, so I'm going to do that. If you want more information about any of these games, because I'm only going to talk about each one briefly, there's a geek list down below in the description. You can go ahead and click that, and yeah, let's get into the games. My number 10 game for 2017 was The Quest for El Dorado. This is designed by Rainer Knizia, and it's a really interesting combination. It's a race game, but it uses deck building, like Dominion or any of the other slews of deck builders, where you're building your deck and that's kind of how you're allowed to move through this terrain. It's really surprising. This is the first combination of deck building and racing I've seen. Maybe they existed prior, but I don't know about them. So it was interesting. I was like, how has nobody done this before? This seems like such a good combination. Also, Knizia is famous for saying he doesn't play games. Whether or not that's true, who knows? He says he doesn't want them to playing games to like influence what he's designing, which is, I don't know. As an artist, not partaking in the art that you make seems really sad to me, but that's how he does it. And so apparently he hadn't ever played a deck building game, and they had just sort of been described to him, so I think he was approaching it from a different angle. So if what he's saying is true, it really worked out for El Dorado, because I like that game a lot. Number 9 is Number 9, and I promise I didn't just put it in the 9 spot just because. Number 9 is a very, very, very simple tile laying game where you're stacking tiles vertically, but the tiles are polyominoes. They're oddly shaped tiles that are different numbers. You flip a card over, everyone places the same tile, so if you flip the card 8, everybody places an 8 tile, and you're basically trying to get big numbers higher on your stack. It's a nice little spatial puzzle. I like it a lot. It's incredibly simple. It plays pretty quick. The reason it's not higher is I have an issue with the in-game scoring, because you multiply the number, like whatever height it is on your stack, so if an 8 is on the 3rd level, you multiply that by 2, because the first level doesn't count as any, so then that's 16 points, and you're doing that a lot and adding it together, and your score will be like 84. So there's a lot of like mathiness, and it's a little bit convoluted because it's not like the 3rd level's times 3, it's times 2, all that kind of stuff. So I wish that they had figured out a cleaner, faster scoring mechanic for it, but aside from that, I absolutely love Number 9. It's a great game. Number 8 is Dice Forge. Dice Forge is an incredibly beautiful game. It looks incredibly beautiful on the table, first and foremost. The artwork is incredibly well done. I'm a big fan of the visual appeal to it. Also, I'm a fan of molded inserts, like really good inserts for games. A lot of people don't like them at all, but Dice Forge has like the best insert. It actually works to hold everything together. It's very, very well done. So Dice Forge is a game where you are basically, it's kind of like a deck builder, but instead of building a deck of cards, you're placing faces on your die. So you can pop off the different faces of your D6 and put on new faces to kind of change the probability of things coming up or the value of things that come up. For me, it worked incredibly well. I already really want an expansion because there are, I think, something like 20 cards that are out during the game that you can get that affect your die face, that affect different things you can do. And unlike Dominion, where you can exchange out any card for any card, there's only one other card that can exchange for it. So like if there's an A card in the A slot, there are 2 different A cards, either of which can be in the game, but you could never put like a B card in the A card slot. So there's not a ton of variability in kind of the different combinations that you can explore, which is what I really enjoy about deck builders or dice builders or bag builders. So I'm already really excited about having an expansion for this one. Number 7 is Barren Park. This is designed by Phil Walker Harding. He's one of my absolute favorite designers. He always designs very simple, very clean, easy to understand games that have a good amount of strategic depth, which is always what I'm striving for in my designs. So I'm simultaneously like jealous of what he can do and always in awe of it and really like pretty much everything he's done. Barren Park is a game where you're designing a bear park, and you do that with polyomino tiles, so kind of Tetris-shaped tiles that you're taking turns getting from the central supply, and you're placing them on your board, and it's kind of just like a puzzly thing. It's very much what I wanted Uwe Rosenberg's Cottage Garden that came out in 2016 to be, but I felt like Cottage Garden, there were some issues that I didn't love about it, and Barren Park totally replaced that game for me. It is kind of my go-to, very quick, easy polyomino tile laying game. I highly recommend it if you like fast, simple games that are easy to understand. Number 6 is Dragon Castle. This was a bit of a surprise to me. I hadn't heard a lot of buzz about it, and then I got to try it at BGG-Con, and I absolutely loved it. This is kind of a twist on Mahjong, where you have these tiles that are stacked, and you have to take like from the top row before you can take from the second row, before you can take from the third row, and they're stacked in all these different ways, and it's a very simple, you're kind of trying to collect different sets of tiles on your personal player board, and you're stacking them vertically, and you get different points for kind of how large an area you can create and how high things are stacked. So kind of like number 9 in that sense. I hadn't thought about it till right now. The pieces are awesome. They're these chunky like Mahjong tiles. It feels great to like, you know, click them together and put them on your board. It's incredibly simple to learn. It's not incredibly fast to play. It's pretty quick to play, but I was really taken by this one, and it was one that I just kept wanting to play over and over and over. Number 5 is Ex Libris. Ex Libris is designed by Adam McIver, and it is a worker placement game that has a couple of twists on the worker placement genre that made it feel very new and very fresh, even though it's familiar worker placement. First, basically, the theme of the game is you're trying to like construct a library of fantasy books, right? Different kinds of books. So you're going for sets, and they score in different ways. You're trying to make sure your library is stable, because you have these cards that are books, and you want them to be alphabetized, and you want them to be stable. So you don't want, you know, like 8 books on the top shelf, or 8 cards on the top shelf, and only 1 under that, because that would be unstable. So you're going for a bunch of different ways to score points, and the alphabetizing thing is a nice little puzzle of, do I put this card here thinking that I'm going to get a bunch of cards before it, or if I put it, you know, if I put this D right next to this A, now I can't take B or C cards without them being out of order. It's a great little puzzle. The worker placement's also really interesting, where the spaces that you can put workers change every round, and you rotate through spaces. So you see new ones in each game. They'll come up in different orders and stuff like that. So there's a whole lot of replayability. There's also, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 12 different characters you can play as, including like a gelatinous cube that have different player powers. So there's tons and tons in this game to explore. And Renegade did an incredible job, as always, with the production of the game. They have really, really nice. Each different character has a different custom meeple. It's just a really nice looking game. So I love this game. Number 4 is Sentient by Alex Kevern. I first played this at Unpub 2016, where it got signed by Renegade. And at that point, I was like, this is hands down, I love this game. And luckily it came out last year, and I still absolutely love it. It is a little bit mathy crunchy for the weight, so if like figuring out kind of like the edge of math stuff that you can handle in your head isn't fun for you, you probably won't like it, but I absolutely love that. Basically, you have these dice on your player board, and you're drafting cards that you place between the dice, and the card might say, you know, the die on the left and the die on the right of this card need to be equal numbers, or the die on the right needs to be greater than the die on the left, or the total of them both need to be 7, or if either one's a 3, you get a certain amount of points. But they also have plus and minuses in the corner of the cards you're drafting sometimes, so that then adjusts the die up or down. So it's this like puzzle where you're like, okay, if I draft this one where the numbers are equal, that'll tick this up to a 3, so those will be equal. But then the card on the right of that one that shares this die will be affected. It's really cool. There's also a little area majority game going on with what you're drafting. I love it. It's this like really thinky, puzzly, kind of like tear your hair out game that I just love how it feels. So if that doesn't sound fun to you, you probably won't like it, but it's very fun to me, and I absolutely love it. Number 3 is Santa Maria. This was a huge surprise to me. It was not on my radar at all. I hadn't heard about it at Essen. I was at Essen, so I think I kind of missed some of the buzz, because I wasn't like seeing on BGG what was getting talked about and stuff like that, because I was there and the convention's so big, it's really hard to get a gauge for that. But at BGG-Con, I got to play it, and I loved it. Again, it's polyominoes. A lot of games this year use those. But you're placing them on your individual player board, and then you have dice, and your dice activate across rows, either rows or columns based on what kind of die they are. So you're placing these polyominoes in ways that you want to like maximize the actions, because each time your die like hits a different space on the polyomino that has a different action, it performs that action. So you're trying to make these like efficient puzzles that then the rows and columns matter a lot. It's great. It's about as heavy a game. It's a midweight Euro, but I don't really play many heavy Euros anymore, so it's one of the heavier games that's on this list, or it might be the heaviest game on this list, in fact, where I generally feel like oftentimes heavier games for me don't warrant the increased playtime or kind of increased thought, where they're no more fun than like a lightweight Euro for me, where if I can play 3 lightweight Euros in the time it takes me to play 1 heavy Euro, I oftentimes want to explore the different stuff in the lightweight Euros. That's just my personal preference, obviously. But this one I felt like totally warranted the weight of the game, and I just absolutely loved it. Number 2 is Asool. This is a new classic. Like, I'm going to be playing this game for years. It's a game that, since I got it like 2 months ago from pre-order, I think almost every game night we play it at least once. It's one where it's just like a nice filler level game. It's a drafting game where you're drafting tiles to literally put together like tiles, like a tiled floor, which I kind of love. The theme is so kind of silly, but the components are so nice, where they have these tiles that have like baked on patterns and stuff, and they're gorgeous. And so it's just such a smart drafting mechanic, where you basically have to take all the tiles of one color from different areas, and oftentimes you don't want to take all of them, but you kind of have to, and you're trying to fill these different rows with different number of tiles, where it's like, I really want 3 tiles, but there's only 2 there. Should I fill that here and have to wait for another round to get the 3rd in order for it to score me points? It has, again, this little puzzly aspect where you score points after every turn for proximity to other tiles, but then at the end of the game for completing rows, columns, or having all the tiles of one color, basically. So again, it's this like push-pull puzzle that I obviously really like, because a lot of these games have that on there. The production's just incredible. It looks so good on the table. It's a thing that you can play with people who've never played games, or people that have been playing games for ages. It's absolutely incredible. I thought for sure it was going to be my number 1 until I played my number 1, and my number 1 game is Charterstone. Charterstone is a legacy game where you're putting stickers on the board, you're switching out cards, you're unlocking new components, things like that. But where a lot of the legacy games, this one feels kind of the most Euro-y of the legacy games, where it's a very, very simple worker placement game at the start, at its core. I'm only about halfway through the whole game, so I haven't even finished it. But I'm halfway through the 12 games you can play of Charterstone. So I have no idea how it turns out. So take this that I've played 6 games of it, but that's only halfway. But it's so much fun, and you're building these things, and there's storytelling elements that feel good, and it feels like I'm actually making decisions that will affect the game, and it's competitive where I'm playing against other players. I can't go too far into detail on why I love it, because that would spoil parts of the game, but I love how simple it is. I love how fast it plays. I love the kind of like building, evolving Euro game that it is. It's very cute. It's great. It's one of those, I mean, it's a lot of legacy games are getting this, or not even just legacy, like the big kind of newer campaign-changing games like Gloomhaven, Pandemic Legacy, obviously those shots to the number 1 spots on Board Game Geek. And it's giving a whole different kind of board game playing experience, which I think a lot of people really like. I will say the rules for Charterstone, we've messed up a couple rules because it's really hard to sort of find rules, because a lot of them are formatted to fit on cards that you then put in stickers. So the rules were not the easiest thing to grasp, and a lot of that I think is because there's this new thing that's happening in board games that people are trying to do, where it's like you just sit down and you don't have to learn the rules, which is always that they're just on cards and you read the rules as you go, and I don't like that, because I like to know why I'm doing a thing or how it might affect stuff. So our first game was a little bit clunky. I'm sure I could have done a better job of like grasping all the rules beforehand, but it was still a thing where we were uncovering new cards and I'd be like, wait, what does this symbol do? And it was sort of hard to reference that. So know that about it. That being said, that obviously wasn't a huge tick against it, 'cause it's still my number 1 game of the year. So that's it, Charterstone. All right, that's the list. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope that you found out about a game or two that maybe you hadn't heard of, or maybe one or two that you were on the fence about and now you're going to try and hopefully love as much as I did. I have a Patreon, so if you want to support me for doing stuff like this, there's a link down below, and that would obviously be much appreciated. Every week I do board game news videos where I cover the top stories that are happening kind of in the board game world in short segments, about 5 minutes, so you can kind of stay up to date and know what's going on in the board game world without it taking a ton of your time having to search out all the different stuff. Also, feel free to follow me on social media. I'm at Chris Bryan Games on Instagram and Twitter, and I, talk about games I'm designing, my life, my thoughts on board games. It's mostly board game related stuff. So yeah, do that if that sounds interesting to you and you want to do that. And yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.